Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to ranking the greatest Americans in history. Feel like this is going to be controversial, but you know what, I'm just here to see. I mean, I probably won't know a lot of these, but some of these I will know, and it'll be interesting to see why they're ranked and all of that. I assume the list is made by him, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, I've reacted to this channel a few times before. I enjoy reacting to his videos. It's a bit of a different style to what I usually react to, but I enjoy it. So I mean, yeah, it is what it is. If you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. But yeah, we're going to check this out. Hopefully going to enjoy. I've not subscribed to him yet. I'll subscribe to him now. I thought I had. But yeah, we're going to check him out. Hopefully you're all doing well. I'm still coughing a bit, sniffling a bit. I'm not ill, but I'm just have the lasting effects of that. For some reason I've got a cough, even though I've not been ill for quite a bit of time now. But yeah, I'm feeling good, which is always good to see. But yeah, links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my reactions to many different things. Movies, series, all this good stuff. A lot of US series, a lot of random YouTube videos that I can't post for copyright or age restriction reasons, or just many other reasons like that. And yeah, just many suggested reactions to content that you want to see. So yeah, links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see that. But let's jump into this and see the greatest Americans in history. Gonna be controversial.
So a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about the greatest people in history as determined by a series of TV contests that were held in countries around the world in the early 2000s. The American version of this was a show called Greatest Americans, and it aired on the Discovery Channel in the year 2005. The way it worked is that the show did a survey of the American public in which they were asked to name the greatest American who had ever lived, and then they revealed the top 100 most popular choices. They then had a second round of voting to re-rank the top 10, and spoiler alert, Ronald Reagan won. Anyway, today I thought we would dive a little bit deeper into the results of this 15-year-old survey, which, despite being 15 years old, is still one of the most comprehensive efforts.
Probably has changed a little bit with all the new generation. They're probably voting for, I don't know, some TikTok YouTubers or TikTok stars and stuff like that. Charlie D'Amelio, or whatever, however you say her name, that she's probably getting ranked #1 by a lot of the young generation.
To document the greatest Americans that has ever been done. So let us take a closer look at the sort of people who made it into the top 100. How has our definition of what is a great American changed over the last decade and a half? Who did we think was great back then that we maybe think is not so great now? And who were some of the most obscure or dated choices that made it in? So let us get into it. So the top 10 went like...
Okay, for the top 10, do I think any musicians will be in this? I'm sure in the top 100 there will be some musicians, because they will have definitely touched a lot of people's lives. Politicians will be in here. Rightly or wrongly, politicians are probably going to be the most dominant, because that's just sort of like they're the face of a certain era. Musicians, I do want to see someone like Snoop Dogg or Elvis be here. I'm not really good with old musicians. I think Snoop Dogg will be in the top 100. Elvis will probably be in the top 25. I don't know why I'm starting with those two. I can't really think of others off the top of my head. I don't know, but all president... I don't know. Either presidents will be on here or presidents just won't be on here. I'm going to take the first guess and say there's going to be like a lot of presidents in like the top 25 to top 50.
Like this. Ronald Reagan in first place, Abraham Lincoln in second, Martin Luther King Jr. in third, George Washington in fourth, and Ben Franklin in fifth. So far,
what was it, top 10? It was 5.
Relatively uncontroversial.
Yeah, it makes sense, to be fair.
Right. Well, except for maybe Reagan being in first place. As I said in my first video, at the time that this survey was done, Reagan had only died a year earlier, which was treated as this very big deal and sort of resulted in an outpouring of Reagan nostalgia across America.
All Millard Fillmore schools are now Ronald Reagans. The Mississippi River is now the Mississippi Reagan.
And my good friend Frankenstein is now Franken Reagan.
But on the other hand, Reagan was also very popular, even in his own time, and he is still, to this day, ranked very highly when Americans or American historians are asked to name the greatest ever presidents. More controversial, however,
but the fact
American historians are asked to name the...
He's ranked here in terms of presidents, so why is he ranked #1? Is it maybe just the fact that it was so close to the time he passed away? Because he's ranked here. There's all these presidents ahead of him, but they're ranked lower. I mean, there's obviously reasons he mentioned them. Makes sense.
Greatest ever presidents. More controversial, however, was George W. Bush being in 6th place, who was the current president of the United States at the time. Bush today is, I feel, not regarded all that well, even among fellow Republicans. But in 2005, he had just been re-elected less than a year ago, and partisan politics being what it is, a lot of Republicans were still very fiercely loyal to him. This is an important thing to keep in mind these days when people sometimes freak out about how popular Donald Trump is with Republicans. The fact is, all presidents tend to be very popular with partisans of their own side, and it can take a while for these feelings to melt away. Case in point, greatest American number 7, Bill Clinton, who at that time was the most recent Democrat president. After Clinton came Elvis, and then Oprah.
Oprah? Actually, to be fair, she's still popular now, isn't she? Was she around back then? I don't even know how long Oprah's been around for. So she's the first, like, she's a TV host, right? And the first musician. Okay, so now we're moving a bit away from the political side. I'm guessing it will come back. But the thing is, with these sorts of people, these are the type of people that end up running for, like, president in the US because, like, you're so popular in what you do. You're then going to have, like, a massive group of people following you and supporting you to become a president. Because I don't know how many there are, but you got Arnold, who's like what is Arnold? He's like he's something in LA. He's like a sheriff or something. And you have the rumors of Kanye back a few years ago running for presidency. I don't know. I could see something like The Rock becoming president in 10 years' time. Well, maybe not, but like stuff like that. Because Trump, was he like a celebrity before? Or was he just rich? I think he was pretty famous because he was in Home Alone, and he obviously wasn't the president. And he was just some famous person, but I feel like fame is a more important thing to become a president in the US because in the UK, I don't think any of them have ever been famous before. They're just, I guess, political from the start, which I guess has pros and also cons because probably not as relatable and you don't know as much about them and all that stuff. But so we're now moving a bit away from the political people, but I'm guessing it will come back.
Who I don't think it is a stretch to say are 2 of the biggest American celebrities of all time. You can tell because they only need a first name. Then in 10th place, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the Democratic president associated with getting America out of the Great Depression and leading the country through World War II. All right, so that was the top 10, but now let us talk about the rest of the top 25, which in some ways I think was actually less controversial. It's in numbers 11 through 25 that you get some of the real cliched famous Americans, including Thomas Jefferson, Walt Disney, JFK, Thomas Edison, Muhammad Ali, Rosa Parks, the Wright brothers.
Are these 21? Is that
Neil Armstrong?
Okay, so now it is a bit more spread out. And you know how I said Snoop Dogg at the start of the video? I've realised it's 2005. Snoop Dogg probably was nowhere near. He was obviously big at that point, but he was nowhere near the person he is now. Okay, so it's a bit more spread out. You got an astronaut, you got a boxer, you got some presidents, and yeah, it's just a bit more diverse. You got a movie creator.
There are maybe a couple of controversial picks, however. Number 11, for instance, was the preacher Billy Graham. Graham is
who the hell is that?
Considered a leading figure in the American evangelical Christian revival of the 1960s onward. It is a movement that has had tremendous impact in American culture and politics, and is actually something I am working on a whole other video about. But that being said, while the evangelical Christian movement is a controversial thing in modern America, and always has been, Billy Graham has long had a reputation as like the one evangelical everyone could agree on. He was a spiritual advisor to presidents of both parties, and particularly as he got older, he sort of earned a reputation as being a much friendlier, milder, more moderate, less ideological, and less combative figure than evangelical preachers often have a reputation for being. Number 20, meanwhile, was Lance Armstrong. Now,
this was before he got caught out? Because wait, Oprah's like when people come out and like things that they've done, right? So I swear there's the interview of him on Oprah when he pretty much just says, yeah, I've cheated. And I guess this is ranked before. God damn. It's crazy to look back because obviously in 2005, the world was different. Like this is nearly 20 years ago now. So there's a lot of faces that you wouldn't expect to be here because things have come out about them. Maybe MJ will be here. Not to say there's anything that he's done, because I know people are touchy about it, but people's opinions would have been swayed, you know. And who else could I think of? On top of my head, I can't really think of anyone, but there's going to be a lot of differences now.
Now, this is a good example of a choice that has not aged well. Lance Armstrong was, of course, an extremely successful professional cyclist who won the Tour de France a record 7 times between 1999 and 2005. During the early 2000s, he was undeniably one of the most beloved Americans of his time, not just for his athletic prowess, but also for his very brave and high-profile battle with testicular cancer. If you lived through that time, I'm sure you very much remember his whole Live Strong anti-cancer fundraising movement. Now, there had long been rumors, particularly in the French media, that Armstrong was using performance-enhancing drugs, but these charges were easily dismissed as just the French being salty that an American was better at their thing than they were. There was a lot of anti-French sentiment in the US in those days. Wow. But then, in 2012, a bombshell investigation by the United States Anti-Doping Agency revealed that...
Wait, so the US's own agency caught him out? You gotta respect that.
Armstrong had, in fact, been using performance-enhancing drugs, and Lance himself eventually confessed everything to Greatest American number 9.
Did you ever take banned substances to enhance your cycling performance?
Yes.
In your opinion, was it humanly possible to win the Tour de France without doping 7 times in a row?
Not in my opinion.
Oh, wow, he really came out properly with it. I mean, I swear there's a whole thing about all cyclists, not all, but cycling in general, like there's a lot of that stuff involved because it's so intense and everyone wants to win. And there's now so many ways you can get around it. I feel like I've seen it mentioned that. And there's also the documentary on Icarus. Is it Icarus? About the cyclist, and it ends up turning into something else, but like how there's a lot of this stuff involved in cycling.
So he was stripped of all of his awards and prestige and is now probably one of the greatest disgraced Americans of all time. Henry Ford is also on the list in 24th place. He is, of course, best known as the inventor of the modern automobile and the founder of the Ford Motor Company. But he also has a fairly dark reputation these days because of how anti-Semitic he was. So he's certainly someone who's a little dodgy to like too openly. It is in the list of the final 75 greatest Americans that we really start to find some odd choices.
Will we see any comedians? Maybe not, because they are quite controversial. You either love them or you hate them. But there might be a few comedians.
However, for whatever reason, the Discovery Channel never released the rank order of the final 75. So all we have is a giant pile of names of famous Americans who are like broadly popular, but not exactly top tier in terms of greatness. So the biggest subcategory of people in the bottom 75 is basically what we could just call showbiz people. People like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Katharine Hepburn, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne, George Lucas, Marilyn Monroe. Basically all of the most iconic Hollywood big shots. A couple of now disgraced people are in here too, of course, like convicted sex criminal Bill Cosby and noted anti-Semitic lunatic Mel Gibson. But back in 2005, people were still in a lot of denial about all of this. The most interesting minor Hollywood person of the time who made it into the bottom 75 is probably Ellen DeGeneres. In 2005, Ellen had basically just started her talk show.
She's been around since then. And I wonder where she ranks now. There's a bit more, I don't know. She's still popular, but I feel like there's... she's not as light, but I mean, I could be talking out my ass.
So this is a rare example of a pick that has actually aged well, since I would say Ellen has only become more famous and more beloved over the last 15 years. I could easily see her making it into the top 25 if they did this poll today. There are a lot fewer musicians than you might expect. Only Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, Madonna, and Michael Jackson. Can you think of some notable American musicians who are missing? Let me know in the comments. After entertainment people, the next largest category is politicians, which is mostly just like every president of the last 100 years. 3 first ladies made it in as well. Eleanor Roosevelt, who is often considered to have been the greatest first lady of all time, made it into the top 25, in case you were wondering. But once you get beyond the presidents, basically every politician in the bottom 75 are terribly myopic choices that have not aged well at all.
It's so interesting how politicians are ranked so high. I feel like in the UK, it's going to be the opposite. You'll see maybe a few, like maybe Winston Churchill, because of, I mean, obviously, not for me, I don't rank that like that, but a lot of people will love him because of leading the UK or England through the war. But then obviously you look at certain things that, like other sides of it, but I don't know, in terms of politicians, I don't think any, especially the more recent ones, would be ranked in the top 100 of the most popular or the greatest British people of all time, because I just feel like that just people don't look at it in that way. It is interesting how the contrast is so different. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it is like that. So I mean, I don't know what this list would be for British people, but it definitely wouldn't be in the same sort of concept as this, you know. But
so, for example, we have Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, the two secretaries of state in the George W. Bush administration. Both were the highest-ranking African Americans in the history of the U.S. government up to that point. But today, both are probably better known for their close association with the planning of the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq. That war was still relatively popular circa 2005, but today it is not something that anyone really wants to take credit for. Former Senator John Edwards, who was Democrat John Kerry's vice presidential nominee in the 2004 presidential election, somehow made it in as well. John Kerry himself, however, did not. At the time, John Edwards was seen as this dynamic, young up-and-comer in the Democratic Party. But then, in 2011, he became horribly disgraced when it was revealed that he had been using campaign funds to cover up an affair he was having while his wife was dying of cancer.
oh my god, that is fucked up. What the hell? That is evil. Oh my days. Bloody hell. That's got to be one of the worst stories yet. Flipping heck.
He ultimately got off on criminal charges, but I don't think anyone knows or cares what he's up to these days. Rudy Giuliani also made it in. He was mayor of New York City.
He was he the one on, because I watched this series, This Is America, and I think it was in the US, and I just found a stream for it, because I love Sacha Baron Cohen. Was he the one who had that incident? I don't know if it was him, but I swear there was someone quite high prestige who had... They were caught out for something, and it was hilarious, but it was also a bit like, God damn. And then there was some weird excuse. I don't know who it was, but he looks familiar to this guy, but I'm not too sure.
During 9/11, and was a heroic symbol of American resilience for many years after. But you know, these days, he is probably better known for being the most high-profile member of President Trump's legal defense team, and his, shall we say, less than eloquent TV performances.
Shut up, moron. Shut up.
Okay.
But there were some fairly prescient political inclusions as well, such as a certain recently elected junior senator from Illinois, or a certain New York businessman.
Wait, Obama was there. Again, it's so weird to look at this from 2005. I don't know who we would have been in 2005, but it's interesting to see someone up there before they've even become the president.
Who had recently started his own reality show. But once he...
Oh, Trump was there as well? Oh, he had his own show. What was his show? Was it... Did he do the American version of... not Dragon's Den. What's it called? It's like a show for people trying to become... like rich, or like from selling products and stuff. I can't remember what it's called.
To get beyond the politicians, most of the remaining picks are relatively uncontroversial. So you got George Washington Carver, Amelia Earhart, John Glenn, Steve Jobs, Michael Jordan, Malcolm X, Brett Favre. I wish I knew more about football. Is he still considered a big deal? Tom Brady isn't on the list, and I feel that would never ever happen today. Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, made it on, I assume because a lot of Mormons voted for him. I feel like his reputation among non-Mormons isn't very high, however. He's probably more likely to be known as a serial polygamist as anything else. So here are two people on the list that I was not super familiar with, but you can see if you recognize their names. Audie Murphy and Chuck Yeager. So Audie Murphy, I have learned, was a heroic American soldier from World War II, famous for winning basically all of the medals, as you can see in this photo.
Jeez.
According to the New York Times, his daring exploits seem almost like a video game caricature. He is said to have killed more than 200 Nazis. For this, Murphy became one of the most famous men in America immediately after the war. For a while, he tried to be a movie star, but he never achieved much success in that realm. Then in 1971, he abruptly died in a plane crash. The impression I get is that Audie Murphy was a very iconic figure for a certain older generation of American, and then when that generation lost its cultural influence, Murphy sort of faded from the national imagination. I mean, I have collected a lot of books about famous 20th century Americans over the years, and I could not find a single reference to Audie Murphy in any of them. But I guess a lot of old folks watch the Discovery Channel. Chuck Yeager, meanwhile, is a much more famous guy, although his fame is also very tied up in one particular generational moment. Yeager was a fighter pilot during World War II, and in 1947, he test flew a new rocket-powered jet known as the X-1 at an unprecedented speed of over 700 miles per hour, faster than the speed of sound.
This flight marks the first milestone in the supersonic chapter in the history of aviation. And you were there.
Chuck Yeager is actually still alive, although he is getting close to 100 at this point. For the last few decades, he's been this sort of good-natured guy who gives speeches and interviews and things about the historic moment that he was part of. The good-natured former pilot who was part of some historic moment is a kind of fun type of American celebrity, don't you think? All right, now let us talk about the person who I consider to be the most obscure in the top 100. The name that I would say makes the whole list feel the most dated. Patrick Tillman.
I don't know if it's the name Tillman that I know, but I feel like this guy sounds familiar, but I probably don't know who this is. Just there's a football player with the name Tillman, so I feel like I'm knowing him because of that. But
has anyone under 30 ever heard of Pat Tillman? He was a professional football player from the Arizona Cardinals who famously quit the NFL to volunteer for the U.S. Army.
Oh, maybe I have then. I feel like I've done a reaction to this guy in my early stages of the channel.
After 9/11. And then he was killed in Afghanistan in 2004. And for a brief period, he was really held up as a symbol of patriotic sacrifice in the post-9/11 era. Today, however, we know that Tillman died because he was accidentally shot to death by fellow U.S. soldiers.
Oh my days.
In this very tragic and confused confrontation in which he was mistaken for the enemy, which was a much less grand story.
That's just horrible, mate. What? Could have chose to have the easy life of getting as much money as he was getting at this high level like sport, and he joined the army. That's some crazy stuff. You gotta respect it, but man, the balls of this man.
Than what the military had originally put out, which is that he had been shot by the Taliban while storming up a hill with a machine gun to defend his fellow men below. Once the truth came out, a lot of people felt very deceived by the way that the military had initially propagandized his death, and there were congressional hearings about it and everything. The full scandal of the Pat Tillman tragedy was only really starting to become mainstream knowledge around the time that the Greatest American TV competition was happening, which is why his inclusion in this list feels very dark in retrospect. Anyway, let me try to lighten the mood a bit with a closing assignment for you all. Imagine that the Discovery Channel did a survey like this today. What person who has only become famous in the last few years do you think would have a justifiable place on a list of the top 100 greatest Americans? In other words, what relatively new celebrity do you think will only become more famous and more appreciated over the next 15 years? Who is the Ellen or Barack Obama of this moment? And secondly,
probably some of the TikTok stars, which is crazy to think, but if this was ranked by every person in the country from 5-year-olds upwards, it probably would be that.
Who is the John Edwards or Pat Tillman of this moment? That is, who do you think would get voted into the top 100 Americans if the survey was held today, but would seem like a really dated or embarrassing choice like 15 years later? I am really keen to hear your ideas. If I had to do this myself, I would say that maybe I could see Mike Pence making it into a list of the top 100 greatest Americans.
Is he the news reporter? I know the name. Is he a news reporter? I don't know.
Americans, even though I cannot imagine that he is going to wind up as a politician with much of a long-term legacy. But then, on the other hand, I could also imagine a lot of Americans voting for Kanye, and I think he is probably...
When was this video recorded? Oh, God. Maybe not. I mean, it's still by some, but I feel like maybe it's been taking a hit. Luckily, this video was obviously before.
Going to be remembered as a major American cultural figure for a long time to come. Anyway, let me know your picks in the thing below. And if you want...
This is interesting. I did enjoy this reaction. It's a bit different, but instead of a consensus, they should conduct this poll every 10 years. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Ellen was an example that aged well. Well, that's going to age badly. Yeah, is Ellen... I know Ellen's got a lot of controversial things. I've never been a fan of her, but then I've seen videos related to stuff that she does, but hey, it doesn't really matter. Johnny Cash should be there. If there was ever an American icon, it would be him. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. If you want more of these types of reactions, let me know if there's one that I can find. But yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace. Actually, no, you know what? Before I end the video, I was going to think... Rank some of your top Americans now. I mean, if you're even watching to this point, I'd love to see in the comments you just ranking 1 to 10 from now to from the past, whoever you think top 10. It's going to be varied. It's probably going to be causing arguments, but that's all part of the fun. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.